This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. This is episode 156. On today's episode, a AEW superstar reveals that John Cena would not drop his belt to him. We've got that inside scoop, as well as what was going on with the WWE superstar at Full Gear this weekend. And WWE may be on the move again, trying to find housing to host their wrestling programs. Of course, we've got the biggest topics and trends in wrestling, and you know we've got to get into what happened on Saturday night with Full Gears. We got the whole fallout. We're going to break it all down for you. I'm Adam the Jock Straczynski. I'm your host, and doing it with me, as always, he's the one. He's the only. He is the Doc, John Macroon. What's up, cuz?
Full Gear was an epic pay-per-view. Got a chance to watch it a little bit on a delay, but oh my gosh, the violence in the Eddie Kingston match. I do have a critique, though, in regards to the main event, but overall, the pay-per-view delivered, and that's what wrestling's supposed to be. Tell good stories, deliver good wrestling, and the outcomes were surprising, and there was a lot of things to get into, so I can't wait to break it all down. And it was just, for me, it was a pay-per-view that was enjoyable start to finish, well-timed, well-paced, and the results were very fascinating.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good pay-per-view. I've seen other people claim it was the best pay-per-view of 2020 thus far, and I think you can make a case for it. Entertaining show from beginning to end. Point there where I was like, man, this is long. And usually when the pay-per-views, when you like, oh my goodness, this is kind of taking forever, it's usually a bad sign for a pay-per-view. It was just, this one was so jam-packed with so many different matches that when we had, I think we had like 2 matches left. I think we had just finished the Young Bucks match. And I was like, man, we still have 2 more matches left. It seemed like it ran a bit long, but it wasn't a bad thing. I thought this was a fantastic pay-per-view. And I thought, like you said, great storytelling. And I thought you had some really incredible stuff happen in the ring. Kicking the show off, we had Serena Deeb. She defeated Allison Kay, who, by the way, I didn't realize she was from Detroit. That's a Detroit local, Allison Kay is, to retain her NWA championship, come down. So I think that is going to be some more continuation there as Thunder Rosa wants her NWA championship back. You had Kenny Omega defeat Adam Hangman Page to win the world title eliminator and to gain the number 1 spot to challenge for the AEW world title. What did you think of this match? Because this was a hard-hitting match. This was I thought, a fantastic match that told a great story.
Absolutely. That's what I think AEW is shining in, is the ability to get you engaged in maybe a match that maybe you might not be interested in because of the work rate. And I think that's the way they what they're hanging their hat on, is that when you see the producers backstage and who's working with the talent, it's starting to show storytelling, intrigue, and like you said, hard hitting. I think that sometimes in other promotions, the entertainment part of it is just shining a little bit too much. Remember the key word in these promotions, it's wrestling. And sometimes a little bit of some stiffness is needed. And I think that the believability, the violence level in AEW, I think is just enough, strikes the right chord, I think, for the casual fan.
Yeah, I thought this was great. By the end of it, Hangman Page's face was as red as my coffee mug. I wish I could show you what my coffee mug looked like, though.
Yes.
He was beat up and he was gassed. It was a fantastic match from start to finish.
So I got to ask you, did the right guy go over?
See, that's the question, right? This is the thing. And this is something that we've seen with WWE in the past. I think what happens is you stack the deck against a superstar, right, or a wrestler. And what happens is you turn them into a babyface basically through sympathy. You end up feeling bad for them that they can't get over that hump. So when they do finally break through and they get over that hump, it's this joyous rejoice. Like you remember what happened with Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston, forever and a day, was kind of overlooked. And then he finally breaks through, and he has an incredible world title run that gets kind of shoved into the trash when he gets beat by Brock Lesnar in 8 seconds. But I think what you have here is you've got these seeds being planted for Page. I could see Kenny Omega defeating Jon Moxley getting that title and I think holding it for a while only to lose it to Hangman Page later on. So I think for long-term booking and long-term storytelling, I think this was probably the right move. This was not the way neither one of us had this going, but I think it's time for Kenny Omega to, again, reassert himself as the best wrestler in the world. And I think this is a fantastic way to kind of give Hangman Page a little bit of a rub, bring him along, and help develop that character a little bit more. So I guess, yes, I could, this is, I don't think you were wrong either way you went. It was just kind of when you wanted to do things. And I love what AEW does. They take this long-term approach to just about everything, which really gets you hooked in, and it's fascinating. It's great to see. Now, Orange Cassidy ended up defeating John Silver. Darby Allin, this was one that we kind of, we had a little bit of apprehension when we picked Cody Rhodes, but we both picked Cody Rhodes on this. Darby Allin defeats Cody Rhodes to win the TNT Championship. I thought this was a great match. This was a lot of really good storytelling. Cody Rhodes had Darby Allin dead to rights numerous times and just kind of kept playing along with him until Darby finally took advantage of it and ends up beating Cody. You had Arn Anderson on the outside yelling at Cody to pin him multiple times, but Cody wouldn't do it. A little bit of arrogance got in the way. In the end, Cody has to get down on his knee and he hands over the TNT Championship. And I thought it was a really nice moment for Darby Allin. This was a guy who we've been saying he has to win the big match. He finally won the big match on a fantastic pay-per-view.
Created a new star. I think it's good. Give him a title, and it's a situation where when an opportunity presents itself to give somebody a rub, I think that's what Cody Rhodes did there by passing it along to Darby Allin. And now we can start to see what this guy's about as a champion. I think it's perfect. And I think the TNT title can be used as a way now to kind of create the new star. And I think that's good. That's kind of what it's supposed to be. Kind of like that TV title, kind of like that notion of, okay, this is a guy to watch. Not yet the big dog, but somebody to pay attention to in the future. And Darby Allin is there as a character and as a performer. And he stood his own against Cody Rhodes, and that's all you can ask for.
Sheeta ended up defeating Nyla Rose. That was a little bit of a surprise to both of us. And what was probably, I don't know if I want to say it was the match of the night because we had so many great matches, but this was probably the match of the night. You have the Young Bucks defeating FTR to win the AEW Tag Team Championships. There was so much fantastic storytelling in this match. There was so much back and forth. And they say that movesets and the way you wrestle create stories and tell stories in the ring. And that's what you had here. You had the Young Bucks with all their flippy stuff, and then you had FTR, who were basically mat generals, and you had them at certain times exchanging each other's moves. I thought this was such a fantastic match from start to finish.
Yeah, I wanted to be there. Very rare do you want to be in Jacksonville and at Daly's place, but I was like, oh man, I wanted to be there for that match and chant, fight forever. It was such a good match, good storytelling, and like you said, you just didn't want it to end, so I want the feud to continue. It was so good, believable on both sides, and you can't even argue with the result. The Young Bucks winning is fine. FTR having a short reign is okay. But I think that you got to keep telling the story. You got to have more matches on the bigger stage, and I just can't wait to see what these guys got. And it's great because, you know, the tag team division had been taking a little bit of flack for the spot fest nature of their division, but by bringing in FTR to be a complement to the Young Bucks, you got yourself a feud that you can go back to for years to come, and they're going to tap into it. It's going to be great. I think that you're going to have a Demolition Rockers type situation going on, back and forth, Legion of Doom, a Heart Foundation type stuff. You're starting to develop a tag team reputation that's worthy of the praise that's been heaped upon it, and it was such a good match, man. And yeah, you don't have to preface it. It was the match of the night.
And then we ended up having some more incredible storytelling that had multiple layers and was absolutely fantastic. I thought it started a little bit slow, but once it got going, it was everything you expected from Matt Hardy. You had Matt Hardy defeating Sammy Guevara, and you had some special guest spots where Shane Helms popped in, Gangrel popped in. I thought probably the quote of the match was where Shane Helms was over by the Lake of Reincarnation, and he's like, "What took you so long?" And Matt Hardy was like, "I had to get to AEW to finish this off the right way,"
Yep.
Which was a shot at WWE. I thought it was great. I thought the way Matt Hardy ended up decimating Sammy Guevara, he basically did all of the moves that beat up and injured Matt Hardy to Sammy Guevara, hitting him with a chair, bouncing his head off of the concrete, driving him through tables, all of these things that Sammy Guevara has done to Matt Hardy, whether they were unsafe or whether they were supposed to be done, everything that has basically sidelined Matt Hardy the last couple weeks through their matches, Matt Hardy took out tenfold on Sammy Guevara, and I thought that was a nice little twist. And if you've been paying attention, you know that that's what was going on, and I thought it was a fantastic way to end this match. It ends with Matt Hardy concertoing Sammy Guevara, which was his own little twist on it. Thought it was great, man. I thought this was a really entertaining match that had a lot of layers to it.
Absolutely. And the right guy went over. I still think Sammy Guevara is a young up-and-coming wrestler, gets into a heavy feud with Matt Hardy, and I think it legitimizes Sammy Guevara even further to hang in there and to take the beating. That's what wrestling is about, and I think that Sammy Guevara's got a bright future, and he's going to come away with a lot of great experience from being in the ring with Matt Hardy. This was great, and I loved every second of it.
So then we have our heel-on-heel match where MJF defeats Chris Jericho. He gains entry into the Inner Circle. This plays out a little bit on Wednesday nights with AEW Dynamite. Still some tension in the ranks with Inner Circle. Chris Jericho basically told everybody this is how it's going to go. We're going to be stronger. We're going to be better. You need to get on board or you need to bounce. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out as everybody goes to Vegas next week. Jon Moxley ends up defeating Eddie Kingston to retain his title. This was an absolutely brutal match. Not brutal in a bad way. Brutal in a physical, violent, I'm going to crush your soul kind of way. I do have an issue with Eddie Kingston. And I just want to talk about this real quick. And I want to kind of gauge your reaction to it. I thought this was a really good match. I find Eddie Kingston to be fascinating. I think he's one of the best promos in all of wrestling. I think he has a look that is so intense, and it strikes, I don't want to say it strikes fear, but it lets you know, like, that's not a dude you really want to mess around with. But when he shows up in his wrestling gear.
You got it. You got my notes. Exactly.
I'm like.
Bright green singlet looked like he was a jabroni.
Yeah, like you're wrestling in shorts, for one, that are long. They're like long basketball shorts. Like the longest basketball shorts you've ever seen. You've got this weird green singlet on. You look like a reject from the Gumby factory. And then you got these shin pads on. It just none of it works. It's like, and I get that most of it is like it's an honor to one of his trainers or one of his mentors, but at some point, man, like
you're in the big time. You're in the big time.
You are the real deal.
Exactly.
You're not on the indie circuit anymore.
You're on the main
card. Step your game up a little bit.
Wear a t-shirt. Wear a heavy metal t-shirt. Absolutely. That was my notes. Eddie Kingston had the wrong look. Absolutely. Didn't look like he belonged. And in certain spots, it looked really bad when he was like, when Jon Moxley was above him and his flab was hanging over. It's not a good look. No, you wear a t-shirt. You look like a muscle man. You don't look like a jabron. And that's what he did. That singlet is not flattering. Someone has to talk to him and say, okay, next time you're in a big match, you get that opportunity. Stop with the honoring and start looking like a badass. And that look is not it. Absolutely. Great match. Love seeing the way in which Jon Moxley had to pause for a second when he's got the medal around his hand, and then he goes right into Eddie Kingston, and Eddie Kingston tapping was a surprise. Nobody really believed it was going to happen. But Eddie Kingston has to look the part, and when you don't look the part, you hurt the card, and that's what you got to do. You're in the big time now. You can keep those roots. You can pay homage to the indie scene, but you got to look the part, and you didn't look main event at all.
Yeah, that was my biggest issue with the entire match. Like, I thought it was a great match. There was so much good stuff in this match. Like you said, Jon Moxley wrapping the barbed wire around his hand. There were so many high-quality spots here, and Eddie Kingston just kind of, I don't want to say he took away from the match, but he definitely didn't help it. He needs to change his gear. Like, I just have a hard time with it.
Change your gear, Eddie Kingston. That's it. Someone will tell him he's going to have to.
All right, so leader of the pack here. You're still leading the way. But because of the MJF match, I get the point. I cut into your lead.
Oh.
It goes from 5 to 4. So don't call it a comeback, baby. I've been here for years. 10.5 to 6.5. You're still whipping my butt. I've got work to do. So it'll be interesting when the next pay-per-view comes around if I can gain a couple more points and catch up to you. But you like how I'm nickel and diming you here. I ended up splitting points with you. Now I took the point. So hopefully next time I can take another point and I cut into that lead some more and I make this interesting. Let's jump into SmackDown real quick. Is WWE transitioning from Bayley versus Sasha Banks a little bit too soon? So Bayley and Sasha Banks feels like it still has quite a bit of tread left on it. And Bayley and Sasha Banks has been arguably one of the best things in WWE. I think it would probably go Roman Reigns and the development of Roman Reigns and Jey Uso then followed by Bayley and Sasha Banks, and then you have everything going on with The Fiend. I think in that order. They now add Carmella into the mix. We haven't seen Carmella in months. She shows up, attacks Sasha Banks, and she's now thrust into the women's SmackDown Championship picture. Are we transitioning and moving away from Bayley, Sasha Banks just a tad too early? Could we have squeezed a little bit more out of this?
No.
Or is this the right time?
The right time with the wrong person to give the rub to. Carmella's been there. Remember she won the Money in the Bank. So my note was, Carmella was a letdown. You need someone bigger. You need someone at a higher level. I know that we've talked about elevating people. It's just Carmella, I don't know. I would have maybe liked to see maybe Alexa Bliss, maybe somebody else that you're trying to elevate from NXT. But Carmella, what really are you going to do now? She's a heel character. It's played out. So I'm not impressed with it, but I don't think so. I think it was time to move forward.
I think it's time to move forward, too. This is something that we end up crucifying WWE on a lot, is that they end up sticking with the same storyline for too long. And I don't think Carmella's a bad choice. I think there could have been somebody else you could have possibly have went with. Now, remember, Alexa Bliss is on Monday Night Raw. You could go with somebody like Bianca Belair, who I think is a little bit more of a badass, and you could insert her into that picture and insert her into that mix. And I think Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair would have fantastic matches. Bianca Belair and Bayley would have fantastic matches. You could have a great three-way for that title with all of them. I don't know if Carmella is the right choice, but it's nice to see her get some more screen time. Let's transition over to Raw. And this is an issue that I'm having with Monday Night Raw. And I'm not sure if you're in the same boat as me or not. But I feel like, and this happens pretty much every year, but it feels like the build to Survivor Series usually derails any momentum and any awesome storyline that we have and turns Monday Night Raw into an extremely boring and directionless show. And I feel like that's where we are right now. Would you agree or disagree that Survivor Series, because of where it's placed either on the calendar or just the building towards these different SmackDown versus Raw matches, just kind of pulls away from the very fabric that you have implanted and have built to tell awesome stories?
Yeah,
because
it's the same thing every year.
I'm just bored.
It's bored because it's the same thing every year. Oh, the guys that make up the team don't like each other. It's the same thing. It's like you could have even done it where the team actually loves each other, where they want to be on the same team. They're excited. They're unified. They're all in. But no, you got infighting. You got Braun Strowman. You got Sheamus. And now you got Matt Riddle. So you're just playing into too much wonkiness in regards to, oh my God, how is the Raw team going to function? Nobody cares. It's just a freak match, 5-on-5 for brand supremacy. And I know that they use it to build off of feuds and to kick off things and things like that. And you can interweave, Matt Riddle and AJ Styles and stuff like that. But I will say this. It's not interesting. It's not interesting enough. AJ Styles should be in title contention. You need to have a lot more intrigue going on here. Sheamus, Braun Strowman, Riddle, Keith Lee, and AJ Styles. Really, that mix is not interesting enough. I think that you just got to have the match, okay, and then not make it the emphasis of your show. Make it like, okay, this is what we're gonna do at Survivor Series. You check in periodically, but then run your show, and that's what it is. You and I are bored, and I think everybody else is as well. It's not interesting enough, and it's played out.
Don't you think Survivor Series would be better if they kind of went back to their old way of doing it, where it was an actual tournament? It was a tournament for whatever belt that you were challenging for. So if you were challenging for the World Championship belt, you had a tournament, and your tournament basically culminated with a couple different matches at Survivor Series, and then you would get the number one contendership to challenge for whatever the belt was. So if it was the World Heavyweight Championship, you would get the belt, and then you would go challenge for that later on. Or if it was for the Intercontinental Championship, you would then build the storyline for whatever that next pay-per-view was. Instead, you have this cross-brand mingling, and the storylines in the build just doesn't get you involved. I think the most I've ever been into a Survivor Series was when Becky Lynch got her face busted open, because it was the start of the man character. It was one of the most captivating, real things that you've ever seen, because she legitimately got busted open. She was legitimately concussed. And you know what? She was a true professional. She was like, screw it. Blood on my face. Let's roll. I'm leading this team. We're doing this. That's been the best Survivor Series has been. And honestly, that Survivor Series match wasn't all that great.
Exactly.
But it was the best build for a storyline. You don't have that. Survivor Series is so played out. You need to go back to that tournament format, whether it be for the SmackDown on SmackDown sides for the World Heavyweight Championship, or if it's on the Raw side for the Universal Championship. You need to have that build, or vice versa. However you want to work it. What did you like about Impact this week? On Tuesday nights, Impact airs, and you always take Impact in, and then you give us a review. What were some of the things you liked and some of the things you disliked about Impact this week?
It's not trending in the right direction. A lot of the matches, I was not happy watching it. I was like, oh, it's a lot of C shit. It wasn't that good. I was like, oh, a lot of things didn't hit. I was really excited for the X Division Championship match between TJP and Raju. It just kind of didn't live up to it as much. It didn't feel like it was anything special. You had Chris Sabin taking on Romero with Larry D. That didn't deliver. Eddie Edwards and Chris Bay was probably the highlight of the show when Sami Callihan threatened a sickening attack on Swan until the Rascals hit the ring. But I just think that, by and large, Impact this week was a step backwards. And I just think that the spirit, I don't know, if it felt like just a show that didn't really hit a lot of things. The one thing, though, that I will say is the Who Shot the Johnny Bravo Part 2 was probably the thing online that people liked the most, and so they're going to stick with it. They got this cliffhanger going on with Tommy Dreamer demanding to know if Havoc shot Bravo, and it's fun, it's harmless, it's entertaining, and people like it. That's fine, but I just kind of want to see a little bit more of Carl Anderson, Gallows. Anderson got into a match, and Carl Anderson took on Josh Alexander that finished in a no contest. It's been doing great. Impact has been building that storyline between the Good Brothers and the North, and it's going to be a great finish when that gets paid off eventually. But by and large, it really felt like the mid-carders maybe were given the ball, and then they just dropped it, and it fell flat on their face. It wasn't enough. The women's match between Madison Rayne and Tenille Dashwood versus Havoc and Nevaeh, it was just, that match wasn't really good wrestling. It just was mainly, used to kind of highlight Tenille Dashwood and things like that. So I just, I've seen Tenille Dashwood as a self-centered kind of wrestler already, so it wasn't new and fresh there. But I would say this. For Impact to garner more attention, maybe it kind of has a feel of like a Bound for Glory hangover. You just got to kind of reestablish everything and keep it moving in a direction that's a little bit more emphasized on the mid-card, maybe some more of the talent that can get over, like EC3 should be more emphasized, Moose should be more emphasized. You're kind of getting into a spot where some of these women and some of these side shows are not as entertaining, and it hurt the show. So this was like a D+ show in my mind. I didn't like it.
That's probably the lowest grade you've given for an Impact review in quite some time. So it's weird how Impact kind of ebbs and flows. It puts out great material for a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden there's something in the dumpster. So hopefully they can get things back on track and start giving you what you like and what you love with some A-quality material. Now on NXT, I really felt like, and I'm not sure how you felt, I really felt like NXT was a setup for next week.
Yeah.
A lot of Rio versus Io Shirai, Finn Balor coming back, a lot of highlighting what's taking place coming up, but not a whole ton of story development or a lot of things really going on with this NXT. Now, you did have Leon Ruff defeat Johnny Gargano for the North American Championship, and that was kind of a weird thing that opened up the show. But after that, I was like, okay, cool. So this is a great way to open a show. You got a title change. This was supposed to be a spoof spot, and Johnny Gargano ends up losing his belt, and now he's upset. That kind of was weaved throughout the entire night. But after that, you didn't really get a whole lot.
Exactly. And I just kind of felt like maybe it's like a little bit of a Halloween Havoc hangover. You're trying to just kind of get through the next show. But it didn't. It just felt like maybe this was like a thrown together type thing, and let's just kind of a transition show. And the transition shows, I think you and I don't like too much because there's so much out there, and we want to have our time be used properly. But it was a transition show. It was okay, just not good enough.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Now, AEW had a couple nice spots. I thought Cody Rhodes cutting a promo and then getting interrupted, and it looks like Cody Rhodes versus Shaq might be a thing. But I thought Brandy Rhodes' promo on, I don't remember the lady's name. She referred to herself as the Total Package. She is a new Brandy Rhodes' promo on her was absolutely fantastic. I think the one thing that I really do want to kind of hone in on, though, is Pac is back.
Pac is back.
If you guys remember Neville from WWE, he goes by Pac. He's back. He looks incredible. This guy hasn't wrestled in what seems like a year. He's been locked down in the UK because of everything going on with COVID, was finally able to get out and get to the United States. So he is now back in AEW where he can wrestle, and he wants Eddie Kingston. Now, I think what we're going to get in the coming weeks is we're going to get a storyline as to why he wants to fight Eddie Kingston. Eddie Kingston is in the ring, and he is basically trying to separate and divide Pentagon and Phoenix and trying to basically drive a wedge between the two brothers. And I think what we're going to have here, and I think what the backstory is going to be, and I want to give a little bit of a picture of it. And I kind of want to get your take on what I'm going to build here, because they kind of alluded to a couple things, and then I kind of had to go do some of my own research and try to figure some stuff out. But what it appears, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, and you tell me if you like this, Eddie Kingston and Pac were part of a faction, I'm assuming in England or maybe even on the indie scene. And what you had is you had Phoenix, you had Pentagon in that same faction. And then what happens is Pac ends up getting left behind. Eddie Kingston rolls on, ends up in AEW. And now Pac is looking for some retribution and comes back. And I think what you're going to have is you're going to have Phoenix and Pentagon separate and have to pick sides here. And I think it's going to drive a huge wedge in Eddie Kingston's little faction that he's come to AEW and has started. And I want to know what you think about something like that as far as a storyline goes.
It's interesting in regards to the setup with Eddie Kingston, because it lends to wondering what this character needs to be doing and should be. It kind of feels like Pac is good, but is it good enough for where Eddie Kingston was? You feel like maybe he needs to stay in that title picture. I can understand why you want to go in the direction of Pac, because it can bring out some more violence, and these two guys kind of have a similar style, and it could produce some great matches. Overall, I think that Pac, because of the way he's been in and out, is not yet at the level of where Eddie Kingston is at in AEW, and that presents a little bit of a challenge in believability. But I think bottom line is, even though you and I may not agree as to how they got there, I am intrigued by it. I do want to see now Eddie Kingston got the rub from the world champ. Yes, he's got to change and tweak some things just a little bit to get to the next level. But you got to have the opportunity now to see what's next and how he handles it. And I think the feud with Pac could be very interesting and could draw some money.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of how this plays out and where they take this story. Again, it's weird. Like, Pac shows up and all of a sudden challenges Eddie Kingston, and at the announcers table, they did a really poor job of really breaking down why. So I think next week you're going to get more of a build, you're going to get more of a backstory, and it's going to kind of take you in the direction you really want to go. I think AEW did a great job coming off of a fantastic pay-per-view where they've almost hit the reset button on storylines. So you have a lot of new open-ended stories, and this was kind of the jump-off point for those. I think you're going to get Cody Rhodes, you're going to get Darby Allin taking on Team Taz. I think that's going to be interesting. Cody Rhodes was looking to challenge MJF, but that's not happening. He looks like he's got to get through Brian Cage first. Pac is back, going to be taking on Eddie Kingston now. You've got their own little mix-up with what's going on in their own faction, and then Inner Circle's got their own little issues going on in their faction. So I think this was a nice reset program to get everything kind of built and going forward for what's coming next with their next pay-per-view. So I thought this was really, really nicely done.
Absolutely. Good stuff from AEW. I'm intrigued as well with how MJF is rubbing the Boricuas the wrong way. I thought that was cool in the manner in which he kind of backhanded, insulted them. That was cool.
Dude, how did you like him reading Drake?
It was great. It was so good. And you could see the Boricuas maybe on their way out of the Inner Circle, maybe planting the seeds of a beatdown, which is good. I think the Inner Circle has to trim just a little bit, and the Boricuas maybe just don't feel like they belong at this point in time. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. AEW, a show always that you need to be paying attention to. All right, cuz, hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made the list?
So WWE announced last week that the 2020 Survivor Series pay-per-view will feature a special farewell to The Undertaker. So if you're not really involved in what's going on with the Survivor Series or the matches, or all of it just kind of seems like a little bit of a dumpster fire, maybe The Undertaker might get you to tune in and might interest you. Now, WWE's residency at the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida is nearing its conclusion, which means it must soon find a new venue for Raw and SmackDown and all of their pay-per-views amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2020-2021 NBA season is beginning to get set, and they're set to start on December 22nd. And per PW Insiders, Mike, the Orlando Magic needs WWE out of the Amway Center by December 5th. After initially running shows out of the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, WWE made the switch to the Amway Center beginning in August. WWE created the Thunderdome, which gave fans a better viewing experience and brought some fans into the arena virtually via the LED boards. Now, while the Thunderdome will soon be on the move, it's unclear where WWE will end up going. Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Florida, is a possibility of a new location that's being discussed. During his appearance on Talk is Jericho, Jake Hager, better known as Jack Swagger when he was in WWE, revealed that John Cena refused to lose the WWE Championship to him. And here's the quote, courtesy of Fightful.com. I had a little inclination, but I had no idea what was going to happen. The night before, I teased it on Raw. I hit Cena with a briefcase. I snuck up on him when he had one of his brilliant promo segments. Later, come to find out, he refused to do the job for me for the WWE Championship. We won't talk about that. The most unselfish top man in the business. Hager had won the Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania and then attempted to cash in on Cena the next night. What wasn't planned, or what the plan didn't account for, was Cena not going along with that. So instead, he kind of pivoted, turned his attention to Chris Jericho on SmackDown, and that obviously was much more successful as he ended up capturing the World Heavyweight Championship. A WWE star was also seen at AEW's Full Gear this past weekend. So Raw star Cedric Alexander was at the pay-per-view this Saturday. It sounds like Shaq was there as well. Alexander is married to AEW star Big Swole. A little surprised because WWE tries to control what their wrestlers do and where they end up going. I guess no big surprise because his wife was there and she was in the back. So it's all taking place in Florida. So what's a little jaunt over to Jacksonville? And that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes.
Make sure to follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you've liked what you've heard or you completely disagree, if you have a different vision of how these storylines should play out, if you're a fan of Eddie Kingston and his singlet and you think that we're just pretentious assholes, let us know. We love debating and getting into it. We love interacting with the supporters of the Detroit Sports Podcast. It's real fun, especially in the world of wrestling with so many different opinions. It's real fun these days because of the polarizing nature of a lot of the performers across these great promotions. So it's great to do this podcast. I always enjoy it every Friday. Make sure to subscribe. All you got to do is go to your favorite place that you listen to podcasts and type in Detroit Sports Podcast. And then when our daily content drops, all you got to do is just turn on your phone and boom, it pops right up. No extra work done by you when you subscribe to the network, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to dropping next week's Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.